Hi, my name is Alicia, this is Nyx, and you are watching the Reptile Rendezvous. So in the past, I've actually made a video about my dream reptiles and reptiles I'd love to keep in the future, but I thought it would be interesting for a video to talk about the reptiles I would never keep. In this video, I'm going to be looking at those animals and explain why I think they wouldn't be a good fit for me and my lifestyle. That being said, they might be an amazing species for you, and for the reasons they don't work for me, they could be perfect for you. So I would definitely watch this video if I were you, because maybe you'll find some ideas of species you want to keep. I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get on to the list. So the first two entries on this list are very generalized, and the first one is any large species of snake, lizard, or tortoise. Don't get me wrong, I love all these animals so much, and in a perfect world I would love to keep them, but it's just not realistic for me. They obviously require tons of space. For example, a Nile monitor requires a minimum size enclosure of a small room, and that still seems small for these guys. They also sometimes have very complicated diets, and feeding them daily can be a daunting task. As well as this, a lot of these species are actually kept outdoors in the hotter months, and this is actually to provide them more space as well as natural heating in UVB, but this is completely unrealistic for me because I live in Canada and it's just not hot enough majority of the year round to even sustain a regular species, let alone a huge species. Out of all of them, I would probably be most likely to keep a larger snake. If you disregard the space requirement, their diet is the easiest because they tend to only need to eat maybe once a month or once every 2 weeks or so. But then again, I don't really have space for a rabbit or a small pig in my freezer. Outside of all of that, a lot of these animals are actually illegal to keep in my area due to bylaws. I realistically couldn't even keep them without a permit or special regulations to follow, so it would just be a lot more work to even try and have these animals in the first place. The next species on this list is another big group, and that is the crocodilians. Following the larger species, I would never keep any crocodilians. I know there are some smaller ones, but they're just really not for me. I love them in the wild. I personally don't enjoy taking care of water parameters and all that stuff. That's why I don't really have any fish at the moment. Maybe down the line, if I learn how to do it properly, I would be open to it, but as of right now, just the idea of keeping a huge water space for these guys sounds like hell. I also don't particularly enjoy the idea of keeping species that I can't handle and can't necessarily handle safely. That's why I don't really think I'll ever keep venomous species either, but I didn't put them on this list because I thought that was pretty self-explanatory. I would much rather keep a smaller species like a red-eyed crocodile skink instead, who have those kind of crocodilian features, than a oversized lizard who loves water a little too much for my liking. For the rest of this video, we'll definitely be in more specific species, so we're gonna start with Tokay geckos. And don't get me wrong, these guys are beautiful. I love the blue and orange colors, but in a perfect world where I lived in a multiple story home and my reptile room was as far down as possible, I would definitely keep these guys. That's not the case. In my current setup, where all my animals are in my room, and probably in the future where I'll be living in an apartment where they'll be in the vicinity of me, an animal who barks extremely loud genuinely sounds like torture. I am someone who values my sleep very much, and the idea of getting a Tokay gecko who's going to be screaming at me in the middle of the night just doesn't sound pleasant. I've also, from certain keepers who have these guys, have heard that they can be a little bit defensive, and again, as someone who enjoys handling my animals, I just don't really want to have an animal that is possibly defensive. I do know of a lot of people who have been able to tame them down, but I just couldn't get past the very loud barking. The next species on this list I've actually had before, and that is a sand boa. Now my sand boa's name was Seraphine, and although I did think she was very pretty, I would definitely never keep one again. The reason I no longer have her is because she was no longer eating for me no matter what I did and what I tried, so I gave her back to her breeder and decided not to take her back because I realized that she just really wasn't the snake for me and it wouldn't have been a good fit in the long run. I learned pretty quickly that a snake, or any animal really, that I never saw was not for me. It basically just felt like owning a very expensive box of dirt, and I didn't like it, to be honest. She was always burrowing, which of course is her natural behavior, but as someone who enjoys watching their animals actually interact with their environments, it was a tad bit boring just watching her dig in the dirt for hours and hours and hours every day. On top of this, my sand boa was literally a baby. She was so young, so she was pretty defensive because she was a little scared because she was like this big, which would then cause her to try and bite me, and she would musk all over me whenever I'd be trying to move her or feed her. So it just wasn't really pleasant in general to interact with her. So if I ever had to get one again, I would definitely make sure it was an adult and it was completely eating correctly before I even bothered even looking into it, but I would never really seek one out. Burrowing species, I've realized, are just not really for me unless I see them more often than not. It's just not the animal I would choose to keep. And the final group of animals on this list is actually chameleons. Although I do find them very beautiful and pretty interesting, I realize that chameleons are just not for me. They most definitely would not do well in this room, but I've also just realized that their fragility would cause me so much anxiety. So here in Canada, for example, power outages can be pretty common whenever it's raining really hard or it gets really, really cold. And for a lot of my animals, I think pretty much all of them, if the power goes out for, let's say, a day, they'll be fine. I try and give them as much heating as possible. I'll bring them upstairs so it's a little bit hotter, but they will be okay. I'm not necessarily anxious that they're going to get ill because of being cold for so long. But with chameleons, they're actually much more sensitive, and having lack of heat or proper parameters for an extended period of time can actually cause more complications than your regular lizard or snake. I just think that unfortunately chameleons are just way too specific for me, and that for me is just too stressful, just because for me, if I go out of town for a few days, I can easily trust my family to take care of these animals. It's not a lot of work, but having to have a super fragile animal and worry about someone else having to take care of it just sounds like a lot of anxiety for me, and it's just not the animal for me. I've realized that very quickly by learning about them. I think they're super cute, I think they're super like cool, and I love the way they eat their bugs and everything, but it's not gonna be for me. I don't think I'll ever keep chameleons. But that is it for my list of animals I would never keep and why. If you enjoyed this video, I would 100% recommend that you subscribe to my channel. I post reptile content every week, and I would love for you guys to join the little reptile family we have over here at the Reptile Rendezvous. If you could also hit that like button as well as that notification bell, it would be super appreciated because it helps me and my channel. But I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.